Okay, since I told you that BYU and Texas Tech were going to the Big 12 championship, BYU named a freshman their starting quarterback and Texas Tech lost their starting running back. Am I wrong? This is the Locked On Big 12, Locked On Cougars crossover.
You are Locked On Big 12, your daily podcast on the Big 12 Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I've taken a lot of heat. In the 48 hours since releasing my Big 12 preseason predictions, but I think I'm going to stick with what I've got, and we're going to get to that. I'm Drake Toll from America's #1 Big 12 podcast, Locked On Big 12. It is Locked On Big 12, right, Jake? This is the #1 Big 12. Thank you. That's what I was hoping that Jake Hatch, Locked On Cougars, the other Locked On guy, would say the exact same. If you make our shows your first listen every single day, all that is good and well will come to you. We will start with breaking down this preseason ranking that I have put together. Then West Virginia, four guys who could not just be contributors for Rich Rod, but also in the starting lineup, have been given the go to play this season. And finally, Bear Bachmeier is BYU's quarterback. Maybe that's not a bad thing. Ever heard of Jameis Winston? Huh? Anybody? It's possible. If you hit subscribe, we get to keep our jobs. Jake, I released it on Monday. Since then, it's had a lot of chatter. I gave it a couple days to breathe, but it is my Locked On Big 12 2025 preseason standings. People are very upset that I have Texas Tech at 11-1 and #1 after losing their starting running back, and BYU at #2 at 10-2 this season. And Utah at 3. Even Utah fans have somehow found a way to be mad at me putting them at 3 this year. What is, if you were the host of Locked On Big 12 and had to construct what the Big 12 will be this season, how do you foresee the league in the lens of the Locked On Big 12 preseason standings?
Well, looking at it, I would have absolutely had Texas Tech as my top team. I'm enthralled with what they're doing. But you kind of mentioned in the open of today's show, since you went about this, Quentin Joyner now is on the sidelines, torn ACL, projected starting running back. That obviously puts a damper on Texas Tech's chances. Now, the bigger stunner, and as the host of Locked On Cougars, BYU Cougars, you picked BYU #2, and you have Cougar fans elated. There's zero doubt about that. The fact that you picked them. The other thing is, you also mentioned that they've named a freshman quarterback, and with freshman quarterbacks come mistakes. The guys have inexperience. So to your point, I think that there's question marks at the top, but the good news is both these programs have a lot to prove, and now they'll have to dig a little deeper to try and prove that. I would have projected myself. I had Texas Tech, and I also believe that Kansas State is just kind of that snake in the weeds, just waiting to really rise up. But at the same time, a lot of people think that Kansas State, like the whole thing with Chris Kleiman is, they're always competitive, but they never get over the hump. And I look at that and I do question a little bit about why I'm so enthralled with Kansas State. Maybe it's Avery Johnson. Maybe it's that Farmageddon's going overseas over to Ireland. I don't know what it is, but I've got a big feeling that Kansas State is ready to break through, at least this season.
It is possible that Kansas State wins another Big 12 championship this year. No doubt. I am not as high on Arizona State as I think the rest of the country seems to be, because if we've learned anything about the Big 12, it's that if you won it in one singular year, you're probably not even going to the championship the next season. And if you are a school like, in my book, I think Houston and West Virginia both fit this mold that most everyone that considers themselves a genius about college football would have both of them at 13, 14, maybe as high as 12 would be a good thing for those two schools. I foresee Houston and West Virginia both being a lot better than expected. We'll get to West Virginia having even more help with 4 players who are going to be active now. But I think that the Houston Cougars could be the second most dangerous Cougars, but very dangerous Cougars in the Big 12.
So I've got a question I want to ask you about that, because I've kind of been thinking, I agree with you that Houston could absolutely leap up in the standings here. I'm not as high on West Virginia. I think first-year head coaches, with what Rich Rod's trying to do, and like you mentioned, we'll talk about some reinforcements coming their way momentarily. I have been of the opinion that West Virginia is going to finish near the bottom of this of the Big 12 this year, just simply due to the fact that it's a mass turnover, roster turnover. I know that Rich Rod's an offensive genius, Drake, but do they have a defense that can really stop anybody? What's your opinion on that?
Yeah, so the reason that I believe West Virginia will thrive in the Big 12 this year, by thrive I mean go 8-4. This isn't exactly a world-beating West Virginia team that's going to win a Big 12 championship. They can contend for one. I foresee their quarterback room being better than many expect. Henderson stepped in as a redshirt senior who wants to play. Like we're running out of eligibility here. We're going to have to be at the top of our game, and still Nico Marchiol, the Neil Brown guy, is able to beat him out, and Nico Marchiol can do so many things. We're talking about the same college coach of Pat White here in Rich Rodriguez that can move pieces around. I have confidence he can still coach. And between Nico Marchiol and even a couple of quarterbacks behind him that could be legitimate pieces if you throw them back there at slot randomly, and now Jaheim White at running back, that gives me enough to say West Virginia can sneak up on a few schools. And the way their schedule's built out is not easy. It's not easy, but they seem like the team of chaos that TCU kind of was last year, where TCU any given week could beat somebody in the top 4 or 5 of the Big 12, but would also lose to Houston. You're going to see that out of at least somebody. Kansas was that as well. West Virginia feels like that team for me. And it sounds like you're pretty on board with the Houston pick, though. Not a lot of question marks there as much.
Yeah, I do like the Houston Cougars. So I want to ask you another question. You mentioned the fact that BYU is going to be starting a freshman quarterback. I obviously heard your conversation about why you picked BYU, obviously, to finish second, or at least go to the Arlington to play in the Big 12 title game against Texas Tech. Can you give me an insight now that they have Bear Bachmeier installed as their starting quarterback, a freshman quarterback, never played Division I football before this, never played Power 4 football before this? Does it change your mindset on the BYU Cougars? Because I'm of the opinion that a freshman quarterback could be a bit of an impediment for BYU.
Impediment is quite possibly the right word. I see a lot more in the film from practice this year from Bear Bachmeier than I did last year from Isaac Wilson. I'm not the guy to claim that I can break down film as good as a college coach. I'm not the guy to claim that my sources are telling me that Bear Bachmeier is the greatest thing since sliced bread, or that truly he's like Tim Tebow with a better arm. That's an insane thing to say about a freshman quarterback. That's wild. However, he is, based on the film, based on the way the team has embraced him, and even a bit of this is the culture of BYU, and you've had the same head coach for a decade, it helps bring a guy along faster. Those things going in your favor. He's not your average freshman quarterback. He is not the typical, undersized, underdeveloped, not ready guy. He looks like a player who is young, but put in a position with 23, 24, 25-year-olds around him who have been on mission or have played at BYU for a few years now that can lead him into. He's got Chase Roberts in his ear. Mm-hmm. And the issue with Isaac Wilson, he gets a lot of comms to Isaac Wilson. Well, that's what happens when you start a freshman quarterback. The issue with Isaac Wilson is that the elder leaders he had in his ear all got hurt last year. A lot of the production that Utah was supposed to have ended up not being out there. And they're great, mighty offensive line that was going to be world beating ended up not being what we expected. And Isaac Wilson was put into a blender. That should not be the case with Bear Bachmeier. I'm still of the mind it's kind of plug and play. And in a similar point to Nico Marchiol being the starting quarterback of West Virginia, the reason I'm confident in Bear Bachmeier is because it's not McKay Hillstead. He went and beat a guy with 2-3 years of college football experience. Now, he went and beat a couple of guys who have been in the college game. Bear Bachmeier has not. The fact that he was able to, in the same way Nico Marchiol beat out a redshirt senior, the fact that he beat guys with more experience gives me confidence. This isn't just we threw the guy out there that had the most experience and was senior laden. No, they went with the better quarterback of the group.
Okay, so I know we want to talk about West Virginia momentarily. One quick question for you. I talked with Richie Bradshaw not that long ago, and we talked about the potential of a Bear Bachmeier potentially following the same path that a Sam Leavitt had, albeit it's a different scenario because Sam Leavitt did have college experience at Michigan State before getting to ASU, but he was a freshman quarterback leading ASU to the Big 12 title a season ago. You said you're not as high on ASU. Is that simply due to the Cam Scadaboo factor?
It is less the Cam Scadaboo factor and more I look at the schedule and think,
okay. Yeah, schedule is a big deal.
The schedule is, if Arizona State had BYU's schedule, and I keep saying this on my show, it's not a knock on BYU fans. I'm not making fun of you for having an easy schedule. You should be rejoicing that you're not playing the top half of the Big 12 every weekend.
Amen.
If Arizona State had the same schedule as BYU, they're in Arlington, I believe. I think they overall, at least preseason, you could not argue BYU is a better team than Arizona State. It is You have to, if you're Joel Klatt, and I think that a lot of national analysts fail to do this. If you're Joel Klatt, if you're Josh Pate, you've got to look at the schedule. You have to go game by game on the schedule, not just this is the better team. Yeah, Arizona State's probably better than BYU. I think you're kind of silly if you think the opposite, at least until we play the games. But based on the shakeout that BYU gets, they play a lot of teams that didn't go to bowls last year, or a lot of teams that weren't that good, and their non-conference slate's pretty easy too. So that's why I still have more faith in a BYU than I do Arizona State, just for what the schedule looks like. Less so Cam Scatteroo. You're right though. West Virginia. Let's get over there. 4 new players? No. 4 old players? No. 4 players that can play? Yes. Locked on Big 12. Locked on Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by Rugiet. Rugiet is perfect for you. If you've heard of Viagra or Cialis and you say, I need something like that, but you can't spend that much money, that's where it's perfect for you. Rugiet Ready. 3-in-1 formula dissolves under your tongue, kicks in fast on average in 15 minutes, and effects can last up to 36 hours, so you can stay confident and in control with Rugiet. If traditional options haven't worked, it might be the answer. Over 150,000 men have made the switch. I love it. It's completely online. Connects you with a board-certified doctor, and bam, you're in. Rugiet.com/LockedOnCollege. Use code LockedOnCollege to get 15% off today. Rugiet, RUGIET.com/LockedOnCollege. 15% off. Individual results may vary with prescription treatment. Compounded drugs are permitted to be prescribed under federal law and are not FDA approved and do not undergo FDA safety, effectiveness, or manufacturing review. Please visit Rugiet website for full safety information with Rugiet. Jake, West Virginia got really good news today. West Virginia, the Mountaineers, and Mountaineer Paul was all over this one, will get 4 guys back. A judge saying that he's going to rule in favor. And here's kind of the BYU twist to this, too. There are a few Big 12 teams that are waiting on whether or not they'll get their players back this season, whether it's eligibility, academic eligibility, or this Diego Pavia rule that has become prominent in college football. A judge just gave 4 West Virginia players the go to compete this season. And according to Mountaineer Paul, they're not just contributors. They could be starters for Rich Rodriguez. 4 guys is plenty enough to change a roster and a football team going into 2025. I think this is huge for West Virginia and one of the bigger storylines to come out of the end of the offseason.
Yeah, I know that you have West Virginia as a surprise team in the Big 12 in your rankings. I've been of the opinion that I think they're going to be finished near the bottom, but you're right. Having at least 3, Mountaineer Paul says at least 3 of these guys he thinks are legit starters, and one he says is a fringe guy. You're right. Having multiple guys of that variety, if they're starting caliber players, that can absolutely bolster a lineup and probably make me look foolish in terms of my thought that they're probably finishing the bottom half of the league. But I think this is a big win for West Virginia. Yet again, eligibility is all over the place. And you mentioned there's a BYU angle to this. Well, the BYU Cougars, while they don't have 4 players pending, they've got 1, and it's a position of need. Now, they have a really nice tandem of LJ Martin and Sione Moa at running back, but they're still waiting on Hinckley Ropati to hear back from the NCAA. While he didn't pursue legal means, because this is an injunction coming from a judge that's allowing these West Virginia players to play, I think it could have some impact on the timeline, because Hinckley's been waiting for multiple weeks now for the NCAA to rule on his eligibility, and hopefully he can turn to the NCAA and say, hey, these guys got the deal done. Why am I still pending?
Hinckley Ropati, it's a great example. Give me, in the context of West Virginia here, if I'm talking about a BYU guy, and this is a perfect segue, talking about a BYU guy that could be a game changer, give me kind of the 1-to-1. If West Virginia just got 4 Hinkleys, what could this mean for a roster?
Well, the biggest thing is Hinckley Ropati is probably going to be the number 3 back for BYU, but what he has meant for BYU during his time as a Cougar is he's been a change of pace guy, and he's been played in multiple roles. He's a willing pass blocker in particular when it comes to obviously passing downs, that you can trust him to make sure that the quarterback has a guy alongside him who's going to step up and take on an oncoming blitzer that you need the guy to make that block for. I'm not saying that he's LJ Martin, because LJ Martin is far and away BYU's best running back, and Sione Moa is clearly the Robin to LJ's Batman. But the thing I look at with a guy like Hinckley Ropati is, especially in light of Pokai Haunga being unavailable this year, he stepped away from the program for at least this season, according to offensive coordinator Aaron Roderick. Well, you need some depth at that position, and that's what a guy like Hinckley Ropati can be. to the comparison of West Virginia, while he may not be a starting caliber player, he may be that quote unquote fringe guy that our good friend Mountaineer Paul referred to at least one of these players as. And that's what BYU needs. You need quality depth, especially at this level, because as we all know, injuries, they happen often, and you got to have guys who are at least adequate to step up into those roles.
Can I ask? I am going to ask him. I shouldn't have you give me permission. I'm going to do this no matter what. 4 new guys, 1 guy, 6 guys, 2 guys are given the go on August 20th. Are we overblowing it a little bit, or is this truly a big boost? Because we're on the precipice of college football season.
It depends on how in game shape these players are. I know that Hinckley's been around the BYU football programs. I've been out at practice. He's been there every single day, albeit in street clothes. And you see him after practice. He's working on his speed. He's working on his timing. He's making sure he's doing everything he possibly can do to be ready. But I also had a conversation with him, and I essentially asked him, hey, are you ready to rock and roll? He said, yeah, I'm ready to go, but I need to actually get hit. I need to actually get into what they call playing shape. And that requires putting on the pads and taking those licks from linebackers. So yeah, there is a question mark about the readiness of these players. It may take them 2 or 3 games, Drake, to really get up to speed. And at that point, if you drop, in the case of West Virginia, maybe 2 or 3 of those games potentially, that could put you behind the 8 ball while you get these guys in game shape.
I'm excited if I'm a West Virginia fan. I don't think these 4 will hurt you down the stretch. Now you're given more options. And I do think, contrary to Jake Hatch's belief in most of the country, West Virginia could be your surprise team sitting at 8-4 at the end of the season. I believed that without these 4. I think these 4 are going to further bolster that roster, give them an opportunity to shock a lot of the country that is going to put them behind it. And rightfully so. You would expect after a coaching change, a guy who hasn't been there in 20 years now, that it would take a second to rebuild under a new head coach. And maybe that is the case, but I have confidence that West Virginia can still win. I also have confidence, even with a freshman quarterback, BYU is going to be okay. I wonder if Jake Hatch believes the exact same thing. This is a Locked On Big 12, Locked On Cougars crossover. Today's show is brought to you by Open Phone. I'm a small business owner myself, and Open Phone has been huge to make sure that I'm not losing customers because I'm not always on my phone. Open Phone gives me the opportunity to go on vacation, to take a nap, to, not have all of my employees, and there are only a couple, constantly next to their cell phone because they need to answer it for customers. You move on when you call somebody at a company and they don't answer. You move on, but Open Phone's the #1 business phone system designed to streamline and scale your customer communications. Don't juggle 2 phones. Have like a shared inbox. Don't worry who's handling this. It's just hey, Open Phone is going to be the perfect opportunity for an AI agent to handle after-hours calls and answer common sense questions. See why over 60,000 businesses trust Open Phone. They're offering Locked On listeners 20% off your first 6 months. OpenPhone.com/locked on. OpenPhone.com/locked on. They'll even port your existing phone numbers over for free. Open Phone, no missed calls, no missed customers with Open Phone. Today's show is also brought to you by Prize Picks. As we get closer to college football season and the NFL, Prize Picks is the most convenient way for me to stay in the action. I go to Prize Picks, I picked over on this guy, under on this guy, over on this guy. I combine them all together, and Prize Picks can pay me a whole lot of money on the back end. That's right. Whether you got your eye on big name quarterbacks or breakout running backs, Prize Picks makes it easy to get in the game. Prize Picks is offering major max discounts. Avery Johnson, max discount. That's coming up. That's 0.5 pass yards. Yeah, 0.5 pass yards. Dak Prescott, max discount. 0.5 pass yards. I do think they'll hit the over on those, by the way. The flex play option is a total game changer. Even when one of your picks misses, you could still double your money. Download the Prize Picks app today. Use code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 off in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 play. Prize Picks, run your game with Prize Picks today. Jake Hatch of Locked On Cougars covering all things BYU. Bear Bachmeier is your starting quarterback, the first freshman to start game 1 in the history of this school. It's almost like they need a Jewish quarterback or something to break, all of the people's brains as the first person to do a thing there in the signal collar spot. Man, I think everyone is surprised. I would, if you followed this, you should be surprised that Bear Bachmeier is the guy, because it was originally McKay Hillstead's job to lose from everything that I heard, everything that I was told. He was going to be the quarterback for the Cougars. And then Trayson had a good run at it. Bear Bachmeier's coming in having not had a spring there. He was a high school football player this time last year. And now he leads a team that, in my opinion, has a roster built to be a top 20, top 15 team in the country, a top 15, top 20 roster in the nation. Is this good for BYU? If that's the question, is this good for BYU?
I believe it has the potential to be good for BYU, yes, because you're looking at potentially a guy who could be a multi-year starter if everything goes according to plan here, Drake. And yeah, you're obviously going to take some lumps, it feels like, early on this season. The nice part is if there is a schedule for BYU to insert a first-time freshman starting quarterback, it's this schedule for BYU. They open up against Portland State. They host a rebuilding Stanford squad. You go across the country to East Carolina, and quite frankly, of the first 6 games in BYU's schedule, I think that East Carolina game is the toughest of the bunch. And I had Spencer McLaughlin's head about explode when I mentioned that to him the other day. But I really look at it. You have Colorado on the road. You have Arizona and West Virginia, who are expected to be bottom dwellers in the Big 12 conference in your first 3 Big 12 games. So there is a real nice soft landing with these first 6 games for Bear Bachmeier to get up to speed. The veteran nature of the offense outside of that, guys like Chase Roberts, LJ Martin, Carson Ryan, a transfer in from Utah that they expect to be an absolute star in this offense at tight end. The veteran guys around him are going to make him feel comfortable. And as Aaron Roderick said, all he's got to focus on here, Drake, is making the right play, getting the ball where it needs to be, when it needs to be there, and not try and force anything that doesn't need to be forced.
Jake, I'm going to hit you with the deep track here.
All right.
You ever heard the name, and this is kind of a niche college football reference. You ever heard the name Case Keenum?
I have.
You know how many records he holds in college football?
A fair amount, because trust me, he broke some of BYU's quarterback records along the way.
Pretty much all of them, actually. He kind of holds all of the quarterback records for career quarterbacks. Do you know what one has to do to set the career quarterback records?
You got to play essentially from day one, like Bear Bachmeier and Case Keenum are going to be doing.
You kind of got to play from day one. Game one's got to be your first 500-yard appearance, and then from there you start to rack up the stats to be able to conquer all of college football's all-time records. And who knows, with all of the rules we have in college football, Bear Bachmeier could play for 6 years and start for 6 years, thanks to how we do things in 2025. We look upon the quarterback position so differently now than we did 10 years ago. We look upon it now as you need the 4th-year guy who transferred in from Western Kentucky. 10 years ago, it was, here's a stud high school athlete. If you don't have a legit quarterback at the signal caller position, let's create competition. And if the freshman wins that position, whether it be at Colorado or BYU, you could be in a fine spot. 10 years ago, no one's complaining about this. And I'm not going to sugarcoat this completely and pretend that Utah didn't exist last year with Isaac Wilson, and not having a QB or an experienced QB didn't derail their season. It certainly did. For BYU, though, if they're in a similar spot to where Houston was with Case Keenum or Jameis Winston at Florida State, or you'll remember the redshirt freshman, Johnny Manziel, stepping into his first spring, his first summer, his first fall with the Texas A&M Aggies winning the Heisman Trophy, that's something I think we've lost. The upside of this could be so high.
Well, and Drake, I'll bring it even closer to home. Remember what Bear Bachmeier's older brother Hank did at Boise State?
Yeah.
He started from day one. He was an early enrollee at Boise State. Now, his time at Boise State didn't pan out the way I think everybody expected when things looked absolutely awesome at the beginning. He spent time at Louisiana Tech and Wake Forest in the end. But this is a family that is not wholly unfamiliar with starting early on in their college careers. Tiger was the same thing, albeit as a wide receiver at Stanford before joining Bear at BYU. So I like what you're saying here is there is opportunity on the table here for Bear to come in and make a major impression. And the nice part is, as I already mentioned, it's a veteran-laden offense outside of him for BYU. It's a soft schedule. A lot of things are kind of conspiring here, and that's not a negative term, but they're coming together to help BYU, help him get in, and hopefully takes the bull by the horns and really gets going.
I've seen the Arkansas football schedule, and I believe it's Kelly Ford has Arkansas as the toughest schedule in the country. I would not want to be a freshman quarterback at Arkansas right now. You're going to be punished and pummeled. I would rather be a freshman quarterback with those 3 non-con games and a soft entry into, really, I don't think BYU is going to be legitimately challenged until the Utah game, which is the 6th on their schedule.
Seventh game. It's actually
7th?
Yeah, 7th game, yeah.
you very, very much should be favored in the first 6 games. Then, if you're BYU, and likely 6-0 in my book going into the Utah game. Can you tell me though, your boots on the ground in Provo, personality? What is Bear Bachmeier like with this team?
He's commanded the respect of his teammates. He's ingratiated himself. And that's the crazy thing about this, Drake, is he showed up in late May. This wasn't a guy who showed up in March when the transfer portal opened, or early April when it opened. He showed up right away and started working out. No, he had to finish classes at Stanford and then finally showed up in late May. And he has come in. He has been pretty humble about understanding where he fits in the pecking order with a veteran-laden side. All he's done is go out and made plays in practice, and everything we've heard from guys like Aaron Roderick as his offensive coordinator, as well as position coach as the quarterback's coach, is that he has been able to lead, albeit being one of the youngest guys on the roster, and that is a very, very good sign. The fact that he can come in, command the respect of his teammates, but at the same time, make sure that he's not acting like he's a big shot, saying, hey, I'm the 4-star prospect. I'm a transfer from Stanford. This is my job to lose. He came in, he beat out 2 established guys in Trayson Bourget and McKay Hillstead, and all the while, I think garnered the respect of his teammates, and that's why he's your starting quarterback in Provo.
It may have been Chase Roberts. I don't want to misquote I don't want to misquote, but somebody like that at BYU posted a picture 2 months ago on their Instagram story of them working out with McKay Hillstead, and it became this thing.
It was actually their assistant quarterbacks coach, Matt Mitchell. So he's a Baylor guy. I think you're aware of Matt's connection with Baylor. He's now officially the assistant quarterbacks coach. And yeah, that picture had all these quarterbacks, including Bear Bachmeier, and 2 BYU legends in John Beck and Steve Young working out with them in Provo.
That I remember the murmurs outside of that were, it feels like this is McKay's job. Was there a time a couple months ago, just based on the murmurs, that was the case, and then why did it flip?
I think the biggest thing is that McKay absolutely balled out in this camp. It's just the simple fact of life is you have a guy like Bear Bachmeier who came in and made the most plays. Aaron Roderick had a higher completion percentage, less interceptions, more big plays, did everything better than McKay Hillstead did. And that's not to say that McKay wasn't good. He was very, very good in this camp. It's just that Bear Bachmeier was that much better. And that's a credit to a young man of that caliber to come in and do that, because this has been a crazy offseason. BYU went into the offseason fully expecting to have a senior quarterback in Jake Retzloff leading them to glory this year. Civil lawsuit pops up. He leaves. He's now at Tulane, and I wish him the absolute best with the Green Wave. I expect he'll be the starting quarterback there, and I hope he absolutely kills it. Then you have McKay Hillstead looking like, he's probably the odds-on favorite here just due to the experience factor. And I know that when they recruited Bear coming over from Stanford, they told him, hey, you're absolutely going to be given an opportunity to earn this job. And if you prove to be the better guy, we won't hesitate in playing you. And to his credit, he absolutely made that a reality.
BYU went into this offseason having no idea who Bear Bachmeier is.
Well, no, I do know they knew who Bear Bachmeier was because they tried to recruit him late in his high school recruiting process.
I would say, BYU fans, I should say, that there was it was never on the radar that this could possibly be a thing, that Bear Bachmeier would be the starting. If you told someone that January 18th, they're like, okay, no.
If you were to transport yourself back to January 8th of this year and said, hey, by the way, you're going to go through a situation where your starting quarterback's going to have to leave the university. Then you're going to have a quarterback competition. And oh, by the way, come September, your starting quarterback's all of 19 years old and a true freshman who's never started a game. I would be hard pressed to find a single Cougar fan who would be like, yeah, I want all of that. Give it to me.
And they'd be frustrated. And then you tell them, oh, wait, by the way, Hinckley's back. And they punch you in the face. That's when they're like, there's no way this is real. There's no way any of it's real, but maybe it is for BYU. That's Jake Hatch every day on Locked On Cougars, at Jacob C. Hatch as well on Twitter. This has been and always will be Locked On. Thanks for making it your first listen every single day. A crossover with Cougars and Dose Grande.